Playing GameCube and Nintendo Wii games on your iPhone or iPad is now a lot easier, and Dolphin Emulator is available on iOS without the need to jailbreak your device. This video is the ultimate guide to installing and setting up Dolphin Emulator on your iOS device. In this video, I will show you every possible way to set up the Altstore so you can sideload Dolphin using your Mac or Windows PC, and everything will be timestamped for your convenience. The only thing I haven't included is timestamps for individual games and custom texture packs, as I'm going to wait and see what the demand is for things like that. It took me a whole month to make this video, so I just didn't have the time to include it, and if there's enough comments in the comment section down below, then I'll consider making videos on that. Also, if you find this information useful, then please hit that like button and consider subscribing to this channel. Now, before you begin your iOS Dolphin journey, I have to talk about a few things. First, you don't need to jailbreak your device anymore. Apple has given access to its developer mode to anyone with an iCloud account, and the tool I use is Altstore, which uses your iCloud account to register apps to be used in developer mode. You don't have to use your main account, and you can use a burner, but Altstore claims it only uses your iCloud account to sign apps with Apple in a handshake process. It's a lengthy process that could take an hour or two, so buckle up and prepare for that. Second, Dolphin iOS is not an official build of Dolphin. It is what's known as an unofficial fork. It uses the same open source code as Dolphin, but is maintained as a hobby by a small developmental team that also work on Dolphin Android and PC. And because it's not as popular as the other versions, it's not been updated since September 2022. And when I peeked in the Discord, one of the developers simply said that they're working on it, but it's going to be slow because they don't make enough money, and it's basically a hobby. Which is fair enough. Hopefully all of that is going to change when sideloading apps becomes a lot easier in the future. Next, iOS is far behind in features that the Android counterpart has, which has much better quality of life functions. Just to name a few, there's the ability to create your own settings files for individual games and control profiles that automatically load in with the game, plus being able to manipulate the graphic settings in the game, allowing me to seamlessly change things on the fly if I'm getting bad frame rate drops or I'm in a certain area of the game that doesn't run well, and I can drop things down and continue playing without exiting emulation. All of this is completely understandable considering the unofficial hobbyist nature of the emulator, but it's just something I think you should be aware of before you install the emulator. The last thing we need is another A for SX2 situation. Also, this emulator isn't portable. Well, it is. And it isn't. In order to start the game, Dolphin utilizes a JIT recompiler, which Apple will only activate on signed apps from the store or via a debug option from a PC or Mac using development tools. So in order to do it, there is a workaround using Altstore, but it does mean that you do have to have it connected to a PC or Mac using Wi-Fi. There is a way to activate JIT, suspend the app, and it will reopen with JIT still enabled, but if you completely close the app and end the task, you're going to have to re-enable JIT using a PC or Mac with Altstore installed. Which is why I say it's kind of portable and it isn't portable, and if you do have an Android phone that's capable of running Dolphin, then I highly recommend sticking with that. Or if you are at home and you have a PC that's capable of playing Dolphin, then you might as well stick with that. Next, we're going to talk about the performance. I'm going to go deep into this at some point, but don't fool yourself into thinking that it is going to be 100%. With emulation, it never is, and especially on hardware like mobile phones and tablets. The M2 chipset is an absolute beast, and so is Apple's phone silicon, but it still suffers from not being the original hardware the software was designed for, and therefore you are going to get bugs and glitches, and you will get some devices that simply can't emulate the hardware. Developers themselves recommend an iPhone 6s or higher, but I'd say even that isn't going to cut the mustard here. My testing on an iPhone X shown that GameCube games run at native speed well, but not nearly as perfect as on my iPhone 14 Pro, which comfortably handled them at 1080p, and Wii games were barely playable on the iPhone X at 15 frames per second. I'll put a visual on the screen right now of my testing, and you can take away from that what you will, but I recommend using an iPhone 11 or 12 at the lowest here. I'm making sure that the device you have has at least 4 GB of RAM minimum for native resolution gameplay on GameCube games, and an iPhone 13 or higher for Wii games based on my experience with emulators. Just remember, what these developers are doing is a hobby and not their job. The emulator is free, it has no ads, you can contribute to its development via Discord. If it doesn't work on your device because it is a 5-year-old phone, then I'm sorry to say this, but you're gonna have to buy a new phone. And if something doesn't work or a particular game has a problem, search the internet for a solution and visit the Dolphin Wiki. Log it with the developers and be polite. They don't owe you anything, and they can stop making this app whenever they want. Hobbies are meant to be fun. Emulation is fun. don't ruin it. I saw a video a while back claiming Dolphin runs in 4K on the M2 iPad, which technically is true, but the game in the thumbnail was Super Mario Galaxy 2, which from my testing runs at 45 FPS in 4K, and unless I'm doing something extremely wrong, isn't exactly what it says on the tin. I always try to limit expectations with emulation because even with the latest of tech, some things just don't work. So if after all this you still want to install Dolphin, continue on with the tutorials and enjoy playing your favourite games on your mobile device. So let's take a look at how to install the Altstore using a Windows PC, and if you go to a link in the description down below, it'll take you to an FAQ on altstore.io, the one that's labelled for Windows, and you can pretty much follow this step by step and you don't really have to watch this video. And there's also a nice little handy video that they've got for you too. But before you install the Altstore, you're going to need a couple of things installed on your PC. You're going to need iTunes and iCloud, which takes me way back to the early 2000s with iTunes and iCloud, and as they are only available on the Windows Store now on Windows, you can actually get these direct download links by clicking the links here. So we want Windows 64-bit edition. I'm going to click on that. That's going to download iTunes for me there, and then we're also going to click this link, which is going to download iCloud directly as well from the Apple servers. Then click the link in the description down below that says download, and download the alt server for Windows. And that's then going to download the installer package as well. Once you've got all three of these folders, you can start by installing iTunes by double-clicking on iTunes 64 setup.exe. Wait for that to install. And obviously next. Unclick these two here, so we don't want to add iTunes shortcut to the desktop, and I don't want to use iTunes as a default player for audio files, because that's how they get you. Click install. And just wait for iTunes to install like it's the early 2000s again. I actually don't know anyone that uses iTunes anymore, so let me know down in the comments if you use iTunes on Windows. Then click finish and it's going to open iTunes, and iTunes is actually going to ask you to install iCloud if you want to, but click remind me later because we're going to do that ourselves anyway. Next we're going to install iCloud, and this is going to ask you to reset the computer, so just be wary of that. Obviously you've got to accept that massive terms and conditions. Probably end up as a human iCentipad at some point, but you just accept it without reading it. Everybody does. Now we just wait for that to install. Then click finish. And then it'll pop up with you must restart your configuration for changes to take effect. Click the S to restart now, or no if you plan to manually restart later. I'm going to click no at the minute, but I might need to restart it to get everything set up eventually. Then the altinstaller.zip file that we got earlier, I'm going to right click on that, and then I'm going to click extract all. Then I'm going to extract. And that's going to bring us with this folder here for Alt Installer. I'm going to double click on that. And then the setup.exe, I'm going to right click. I'm going to run that as the administrator. That's going to bring up the Alt Server Setup Wizard. And click next. Next again. And then next to start the installation. And once that's been installed, click close. Then you're going to want to click start. Go to all apps. Find the Alt Server and click on it. And then if you click in the bottom right corner, the up arrow that says show hidden icons, and see this little diamond here, this shows that the Alt Server is running. Click on it and it'll bring up a bunch of options. But before we do that, we need to set a couple of things up on the phone or iPad that we are using to access the Alt Server. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using my iPhone 14 Pro. I'm going to plug it into my computer. Then I'm going to open iTunes and click continue and press trust on my iPhone and then input my passcode. Now you can see my iPhone has appeared on the left side of the screen. On iTunes, I'm going to click this symbol next to where it says music, and I'm going to choose my iPhone. So it is the 256 gig one. And then I'm going to click sync with this iPhone over Wi-Fi on, and then click done and apply the changes to it. Then when I go to the bottom right corner, I'm going to click on the bottom right corner, and then I'm going to click the diamond that is the Altstore and install Altstore onto Anthony's iPhone, and I'm going to choose my iPhone. Now you can use your own Apple ID and password here, and I haven't heard of any issues arising with that, but I do use a burner account for this. Your Apple ID does not have to match the one that is on the phone. It is just used for verification purposes. So I'm just going to pop that in. It's going to install the Altstore onto my phone. It says install succeeded. And as you can see on my phone, the Altstore is installed now, but it will not run straight off the rip. I now have to activate my phone in developer mode, which is going to make the phone restart. So if I go to settings on the settings app, scroll down to the bit where it says privacy and security, press on that. And now this new section will have appeared because I've got an app that requires developer mode. So I click on developer mode and then click developer mode on. And then it says when developer mode is turned on, your device security will be reduced. Restart your device to turn on developer mode. So I'm going to click restart. So after your phone restarts, it's going to ask you to input your passcode to turn on developer mode. But we're still not done there because if we try to get the Altstore open, it's going to bring up this message and say that it's from an untrusted developer. So if we cancel that, we go back into the settings and then we go into general. We scroll down and we find the bit that says VPN and device management. Click on that and then the developer app, it'll have this bit here which will tell you the name of the developer, which should match up to your Apple ID. Click on that and then click trust. Trust this developer. It's going to ask if you want to trust this developer. Click trust and there you go. You've got the Altstore installed on your phone using a Windows computer. Then when we open the Altstore, it's going to ask if it wants to send you notifications. No, I do not want to do that. And it says the Altstore would like to find and connect devices on your local network. I'm going to allow that because we're going to need that when we launch Dolphin later on. So let's take a look at installing Altstore on a Mac. So we go to altstore.io, it will be linked in the description down below. And we go to the bit where it says download Altserver for macOS. And we click on that and it will download altserver.zip. Click show in Finder and then we double click on the zip file and it should open up with the archive utility. Then we drag this application into our applications folder, like so. And then we go to our applications folder and then we double click on Altserver. Then on this warning page here, it says Altserver is an app downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to open it? Click open. And on the check for updates automatically, I'm going to let it check for updates automatically. And I'm going to click on the cross because I don't want any notifications. If it doesn't open up automatically, you can go into your system settings. Then you can go into privacy and security. And then scroll all the way down where it says allow applications downloaded from, where it says click App Store, you click App Store and identified developers. And sometimes there may be a prompt in here to open the app as well. Now you can see an icon in your top right corner, which is the Altserver. It is a little diamond type thing. It's a lot better looking on Mac OS. This is where we're going to install the Altserver, enable JIT and other things like that. The next thing we need to do is to install the Mail plugin. So if you scroll down, there'll be a bit that says install Mail plugin. Click install, then click install plugin. And input your password and then click OK. Then go to Mail, go to Settings, and then in the Settings section in the general part there will be a bit that says Manage Plugins. Click Manage Plugins and the altplugin.mail bundle. Click on that, click Allow Access, and then click Apply and Restart Mail. It's going to restart the Mail app. Now we need to install Altstore onto our iPhone or iPad. So we need to plug in our iPad. And for this demonstration, I'm going to be using my M2 iPad Pro, so I'm going to plug that in. Sometimes it will ask you if you want to trust the iPad on this computer, so you need to unlock your iPad, click trust on both machines, and we just need to make sure that this bit that says show this iPad when on Wi-Fi, click tick, and then click apply to make sure that whenever your iPad is connected to the Wi-Fi, it will be connected to the MacBook as well. This will help with refreshing apps and enabling JIT for Dolphin Emulator and other emulators that you're going to use. So click on the Altserver icon again, click install Altstore, and then find your iPad and click your iPad. It's now going to ask for your Apple ID and password. You can put in your own Apple ID or password, or you can use a burner account. Then click install and wait. And now, as you can see, Altstore has appeared on my iPad. We're not finished yet. We have to now enable developer mode on our iPad. So we go into the settings, go to privacy and security, scroll all the way down, and there will be a new section in security called developer mode. Click that and click turn it on. And now I need to restart my iPad. Then once the iPad is switched back on, it's going to ask you if you want to turn on developer mode, click turn on and input your passcode. We're still just not quite there yet. We need to go into settings once again. Then we need to go into general, and when it says VPN and device management, click on that. And it'll have a developer app and it'll have your Apple ID that you are using for the Altstore. Make sure that the two match up. Press on that. And then where it says trust this developer, trust, and then click trust again. And now we are ready to open the Altstore. Altstore would like to find and connect devices on your local network. Click allow. And then Altstore would like to send you notifications. This is up to you, but I'm going to click don't allow because I hate notifications. And now we have access to the Altstore. As you can see, there's a picture of Dolphin, Flycast, and there's other things there that you can install. And you're now ready to sideload apps onto your iPad or iPhone. As you can see, the Altstore is an iPhone app, so if we press this, it'll go into the iPhone mode. There is no native iPad resolution support, but it still works on the iPad all the same. So once you've got the Altstore on your iPad or iPhone, now let's take a look at setting up Dolphin Emulator. So go into the Altstore, and in the browse section, you'll notice there is only 2 apps available. There's Delta and there is Clip. So now we need to link Altstore to the source of Dolphin Emulator. So if we click sources, it'll open up this tab here. And the one we want is Oatmeal Dome's Altstore source. Click add source, and you can add all these other sources and you can check out what they have. They think they have like a virtual machine. There's another emulator in there. And then there's another couple of apps as well. So click done, scroll down, and now you can see Dolphin iOS, and Dolphin iOS public beta is now available. Dolphin iOS is the most stable of the two. It is 3.2.1. And if you want to test out the betas as they go, we're currently on 3.2.1b1. You can download Dolphin iOS public beta. But choose wisely, as you only have 3 available app slots on the Altstore, and one of them is taken up by the Altstore itself. So you only have the opportunity to have 2 emulators, and I would like Dolphin and another emulator to go with it as well. So make sure that your MacBook and your PC is switched on with the Alt server running. Click on Dolphin iOS, and this is where we put in the Apple ID that we're using for Altstore. Press sign in, click got it, and it'll start downloading Dolphin iOS onto your iPad or phone. Don't worry if it takes too long, but that took 10 minutes for me, and I now have Dolphin iOS on my iPad. So if I open Dolphin iOS up, I will be greeted by this blank screen because I have no games on there, and it is a brand new fresh install. And you can probably see my bald head in the reflection of the iPad. So if we press the plus button at the top, this is where we will put in all of our games. So if we go to on my iPad, there is a new section called Dolphin iOS. If we click on that, this is where all of Dolphin's settings and stuff are. This is where we will be dropping in our texture packs, where we can drop in any configs or anything like that. It's set up just like the PC version of Dolphin. It is, after all, the exact same code. Now, there is a section here called software, and this is where the games will be copied. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can get your ROMs on your iPad, and I'm going to show you all of those ways. The first one is on the Mac or PC, and the second one is through iCloud or OneDrive. And the third way you can do it is by a classic USB. If you have a USB-C adapter, you can plug in your hard drive and get all your games off it that way. So when on your Windows computer, plug it in your iPad or iPhone, then open iTunes, and if it comes up to trust the computer on both the iPad and on the Windows PC. And then you're going to want to click this in the top left corner here, the picture that looks like an iPad. Find your iPad or iPhone and click on it. Then you're going to want to go to the bit at the bottom in settings where it says file sharing, click file sharing, and click on Dolphin iOS. And it's going to bring up some documents. Now you can't open any of these folders or pop anything in a specific folder, so what you need to do is you need to just drag your ISOs and your ROMs and drag them onto the iPad. And then if you look on your iPad, you'll see that they start to copy over. And just note that while they're copying over, you'll be able to see the progress in the top of the iTunes bar. So now we just wait for all of these to copy over. And once they've copied over, you can check them by going to the Files app on your iPad, clicking where it says On My iPad, and opening the Dolphin iOS folder. And you can see there, I now have 4 ROMs in that folder. So then I go back to Dolphin iOS, click the plus sign in the top right corner, go to On My iPad, click Dolphin iOS, and now I can click any of these ISOs and I'll add it to the software folder that you can see in the middle of the screen now. So let's start with Luigi's Mansion. There we go, Luigi's Mansion has been added. Let's add another one. Back to Dolphin iOS. Now this is a very tedious process and you can only do this. But it does have the added bonus that it puts all of your ROMs into one particular place. So you see Luigi's Mansion has gone from this folder, and if I go into the software folder, there is Luigi's Mansion and Twilight Princess. If I go back to Dolphin iOS and add Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, and now I'll add Super Mario Sunshine. And all the games are now added to my library. So let's take a look at how to copy games from your Mac to your iPad or iPhone. So the first thing you're going to need to do is to plug in your iPad. Then open Finder and click on iPad as your location. and go to the bit where it says Files. Then find Dolphin iOS, and then just drag your ROMs over to the Dolphin iOS app. And they should start to appear in your Files app. Now we just wait for this progress bar at the bottom to finish. Once that's finished, open Dolphin again, press the plus sign in the top right corner, go to On My iPad, Dolphin iOS, and add the game. So first we're going to add F-Zero GX. It's been added to my software, and once again on my iPad, Dolphin iOS, I'm going to click Spider-Man 2. And that's how you add games from Mac OS. So let's take a look at how to add games for the cloud. So once again, we're going to press the plus in the top right corner. I'm going to go to iCloud. I'm going to find where I keep my ROMs on my iCloud, so iOS Dolphin, and I'm just going to click Add. And it's going to move F-Zero X to the cloud. And it's going to take a bit longer because it needs to download it from the cloud. So depending on your Wi-Fi connection, this could take a couple of minutes. And there you go. As you can see at the bottom, F-Zero GX has been added. And that's how you add games from your iCloud or OneDrive. Let's take a look at adding games from a hard drive. So you're going to need a USB-C hard drive or a USB adapter to go with your hard drive. And you just plug that into your iPad, or if you're using an iPhone, you're going to need a Lightning to USB connector as well. Press the plus in the top right corner, wait for your hard drive to show. And there is my hard drive there, the Elements one. I'm going to click on the Elements one. And once again, it's a case of finding the folder that has your ROM in and adding the one that you want. So I want Pikmin 2. That's the last one I need to add for my collection. Scroll down at the bottom and just wait for Pikmin 2 to appear. And voila, that's it. That's how you add games from your hard drive. And you now know all the ways to add games to Dolphin iOS. Okay, so you've got the Altstore running, you've got Dolphin set up, and you've got all your games installed. And if you want to play with touchscreens, you're ready to just play. You can press on a couple of games, see if they work, and you can go through some of the settings and change them if they're not working properly. But if you want to get the best out of Dolphin, then I'm going to go through a couple of settings that I like to change as well. But unlike Dolphin and Android, you cannot set up your own personal settings for each game. So what you're going to have to do if you're having problems with a game is go to the Dolphin Wiki, set up the settings for that game, and then remember what it is that you press so you can put it back to the default one if you want to play a different game. It is a very tiresome process, and I'm hoping that in the future they're going to fix that so that we can set up individual settings for our games like we can on Android. So we'll go to the settings section. As you can see, there is a very limited menu compared to the Android one. If we go to Config and then go to General, this, where it says Enable Dual Core Speed Up, as of Dolphin 3.21 on iOS, this can cause a lot of problems. So I like to just turn it off because the M2 processor that I have in my iPad Pro is already powerful enough to run these games, and it also works well on my iPhone 14 Pro. If you have a phone that's not doing too well, you might want to try enabling dual core speed up, but like I said, in some games it definitely does cause problems, like Metroid Prime. I've had a lot of problems with the dual core speed up on that, and especially on a couple of the Wii games. So I just turn it off for stability's sake at the minute, and I'm hoping that that gets patched in a future update. I'm going to click Enable Cheats because I'm going to be using cheats and patches. I'm going to click Allow Mismatch Region Settings and click Change Disks Automatically. These are all things that are just quality of life that help me when I'm emulating games. If I'm using a game that I dumped from Japan, for example, it's going to run without me having to change any of the region settings inside of Dolphin. And enabling cheats allows you to use Gecko codes, AR codes, and things like the Hyrule Field speed hack. And change disks automatically, it does exactly what it says on the tin. If I am playing Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes and the disc needs to change, it'll do it for me automatically if the disc is. In the Nintendo Wii menu, I go to the aspect ratio and I set it to 16:9 so that all my games that are available in widescreen on Wii will play on widescreen on Wii. Because remember, the Wii wasn't fully HD, and back in that time, people still had CRT TVs and things like that. Next, we go to the graphics section. And this is where we're going to go over our general graphics hacks like they will in Android. So we go to general section. The back end, we're going to keep that at Vulkan. Only go to OpenGL if you're having specific problems with games, because OpenGL on iOS is a lot slower than it is on Vulkan. In fact, on macOS, you cannot use OpenGL anymore. Aspect ratio, I change that to stretch to window so it fills out the entire screen. This is entirely up to you. You can have it at Force 4:3 or Force 16:9 widescreen, but I prefer to have it to stretch the entire window. I click Show FPS on so I can constantly monitor the game. And for shaders, just like the PC and mobile version, I use asynchronous Uber shaders. These are the ones that will probably cause the least stuttering as far as shader compilation. And I also click compile shaders before starting. This is going to make the games take a bit longer to load up, but it is going to be better in the long run as far as stuttering is concerned, because any shaders that are already in the RAM, they're just going to load up automatically. In enhancements section, this is where we can go through the resolution. Now, if you're using an iPhone 12 or below, you're going to want to stick to either native or 720p. If you're using an iPhone 14 Pro, you're going to want to keep that at 1080p. And if you're using the iPad M2 Pro or M1 Pro, you're probably going to be able to get away with 4K resolution, although it is a bit of overkill on this tiny screen. So what I do is I usually keep it at 1080p. Now, Nintendo Wii games are a completely different story. On an iPhone 11 or 12, you're probably going to get relatively decent just on native, and on the iPhone 14 Pro, you're probably going to get decent at 720p. I'm going to put together like a little spreadsheet and I'll put it on the screen for you right now to see, but it all depends on the power of the phone that you've got. Because I'm using the M2 iPad Pro, I can probably get away with 4K, but I like to keep things running smooth, and I don't really see the difference between 1080p and 4K, so I stick it to 1080p, but this is where you're going to go through the internal resolution. And isotropic filtering, I keep it at 1 times if I am on 1080p or 4K, because it's not really needed. Everything gets smoothed out beautifully anyway. But if you're using like native, you can probably fit around this and it'll smooth out some of the games for you, but just know that if you are having problems with the game's FPS, you're going to want to turn most of this off. Everything else here, you keep at the default settings, and make a mental note of what these default settings are, because as you go through certain games, some games require force texture filtering to be on, some require it to be off. So if you press the info button here, it'll tell you what the default setting is. It says, if unsure, leave unchecked. So if you want to go back to the default settings, you just press the I here, and it'll tell you exactly what the default settings are. But like I said before, every game reacts differently to emulation, and some things require force texture filtering to be on, some games require scaled EFB copy to be off, and if you go on the Dolphin Wiki, it'll tell you exactly what the best setup is for each game. And what's perfect about Dolphin Android is you can set these settings up individually for each game. You can't do that here. You're going to be doing a lot of messing around before you play each game. Hack settings is another place where you're going to find all these game-specific settings. I'm not going to touch any of them. I'm going to keep it at default when I first start a game, and if I have issues with a game, then I won't mess around with things like this. I'll go to the Dolphin Wiki and I'll find out if skip EFB access from CPU needs to be on or off, and it'll tell you on Dolphin Wiki, as I've shown many times in my videos. And in the advanced settings, I like to check that load custom textures and prefix custom textures are both switched on. I like to use custom texture packs. If you do not use custom texture packs and you're not really bothered about it, you can leave this both off, but I like to use them. Controllers is where we set up our controllers. Now, if you go to the standard controller, it'll automatically be set up to the iOS touchscreen. And the GameCube controller will be automatically set up to the standard controller. There are options for the GameCube adapter for Wii U and things like that, but they're not actually touchable at the minute, so the only thing you can use at the moment is the standard controller. And then in the Wiimote, this is where our Wiimotes are set up. So we've got 4 ports for the GameCube and 4 ports for the Wiimote. If you go to the Wii remote, you can see I've been using my Joy-Cons, so it's automatically set to that in a minute, but you can send it back to touchscreen. I do not recommend using touchscreen controls with the Wiimote. They are not very good on iOS Dolphin. I highly recommend getting yourself a controller, and we're going to set up those controllers now. So let's set up our controller for Dolphin iOS now. So if you go to the settings section of your iPad or iPhone, and then go to the Bluetooth section, as you can see, I've already got this set up, but it's not going to pair because I've paired it with something else. So I'm going to forget this device. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the sync button, wait for it to flash on my Xbox controller, and then I'm going to click on Xbox controller, click pair, and wait for it to connect. And there you go, it's connected fine. So I'm going to go back to Dolphin iOS, and in Dolphin iOS, if I go to device, it now says MFI 0 Xbox wireless controller for Wiimote. So I'm going to start with the simplest of configurations. I'm going to start with the standard controller. So if you go to the standard controller on the GameCube, click device, and then click MFI 0 Xbox wireless controller, click yes, and it asks you if you want to load the default settings. Now this is actually one of the most perfect auto mappings that I've seen. So if you go to configure on the buttons, A is button A, B is button B, X, and it actually has the official buttons because this controller is supported by iOS. So if you had a PlayStation controller, it'd say cross, triangle, square, and I things like that. And when you use the Joy-Cons, it sets it up to A, B, X, Y as well. Whereas on the Xbox controller, A is here. On the Joy-Cons, A is where B should be. So it all depends. If you wanted to change it so that it was more Nintendo-centric, you could press A and then change that to the B button, and press B and change it to the A button. You can also do this in iOS settings, but I much prefer to do it with inside Dolphin so that I can change it. I actually prefer the Xbox way, so I'm going to change it back to the Xbox way. And again, everything's set up. D-pad, just make sure, go through each setting to make sure that each stick, so the control stick, which is the left analog stick, that's set up perfect. C stick, set up perfect. Now, one thing you're going to want to do is the triggers. Now, it's currently set up at L-analog L trigger, which means if I press the right trigger and the left trigger down, it's going to simulate an analog. So it's going to simulate you push it a little bit. It's only going to simulate that pressure. But what it does not do is do the full click. So what you have to do is you have to set up the full click. So you go to L, press L and press the left trigger in. Now, when you simulate it, it's going to simulate the analog up until the point where it clicks. Same with the right analog trigger. It's not going to click in fully, which can cause problems in games like Super Mario Sunshine. So press R, right trigger's there. So everything is set up now. So when I press in R, it's going to be a full press down. That's one of the things that the auto mapping does miss out. And then rumbles, you don't need to set that up. It's going to set it up always. And on the always connected, when you're playing GameCube games, it's always going to be connected, even if the controller does run out of battery and things like that. So you can save these profiles if you want. Click save, type in a name for it, and I'll put GC for GameCube, obviously. Save. Profile's been saved. Now I'll be able to load that up whenever I need. Okay, so next we're going to go to the Wiimote section, which is a lot more difficult, and it goes on a game-by-game basis because the Wiimote with Wii controls is very difficult to emulate. You've got Wiimote sideways, you've got a Wiimote with a nunchuck, you've got classic controllers, you've got things like that. But first we need to go from the touchscreen, which I do not recommend ever using the touchscreen on iOS Dolphin. It just does not have the same controls as the one that is on Android and PC. So if I click the Xbox controller, it's going to say, do you want to set up the loading? Do you want to load the default configuration for MFI controllers? I'm going to click yes because some of them are correct and some of them are wrong, but they're not absolutely perfect. So if we go down to the profile and click configure, the extension that's automatically set up is the nunchuck. Now this is if we're playing a game like Super Mario Galaxy that requires a nunchuck, we use the nunchuck. If we're playing a game that doesn't require a nunchuck and we just need one single Wiimote, we click none. And for classic games, you're going to want to use the classic controller. I have never set up the guitar, the drum kit, or anything like that because I haven't really played any of those games. But all I know is that the classic controller, the nunchuck, and none are the ones that you're going to want to set up. So let's say I was setting up for Super Mario Galaxy. I'd click the nunchuck, and then I'd go down to this bit here. So this is the Wiimote, the actual Wiimote itself. So the buttons are set automatically. So A and B, I like to have B on the right trigger. It's one of the things that I like to do, so I'm going to change that now. So A and B to the right trigger. And X and Y 1 and 2, that's what I usually set up. And I usually set start and select up to start and select. And then we can set up a D-pad. D-pad's been set up already for us. And in the options section, this is where we can set it to an upright Wiimote or a Wiimote in a sideways configuration. And then motion simulation, we've got the classic shake, which I usually set to buttons on Super Mario Galaxy. I think I set it to RB, but I'll show you that when I set up those games individually. So it's R shoulder, and that's going to simulate shaking the Wiimote. And the point, this is the pointer, and I usually set this up to the right analog stick. So up on the right analog stick, down on the right analog stick, left and right. The perfect thing about this is that it actually has an auto hide function. So if I'm playing Super Mario Galaxy and that star in the middle of the screen is getting really annoying and I'm not using it that much, or probably Super Mario Galaxy 1, Super Mario Galaxy 2, you need to see Yoshi, but you can have the auto hide where after a few seconds, it'll hide the pointer on games that you're playing, which is one of my major annoyances about playing Nintendo Wii games with an Xbox controller, because I'm not constantly pointing at the screen. Swing and tilt, these are things that you're going to be using in games like Skyward Sword. You can set them up as you will, or you can check out some of my videos on how to set them up for individual games. And down here, the nunchuck, the stick, this is the left analog stick, which is automatically set up beautifully for us. We've got the shake buttons for that, for the motion simulations for that. And here, the accelerometer and the gyroscope, these are all things that you're going to need if you're playing Nintendo Wii games. So that's the basic control setup for Dolphin iOS, and I'll go much deeper into that in the future. So we'll go to the game section again, and this is where we can start our individual games. And just because I'm going to show you some of the in-game menus that are available, we're just going to use a GameCube game, and I'll just start with Animal Crossing. So I started the game, and this is one of the downsides to Dolphin iOS, is that my laptop needs to be on with the alt server running because it needs to run a debug program to start JIT, which is a very important feature when it comes to Dolphin running on iOS, and it cannot be activated remotely. You're going to at least need a Wi-Fi connection if you're going to want to activate JIT. So you're going to need to open the computer that has the alt server on and wait for it to enable JIT. If it does not enable JIT, then you can click the icon in the top right corner of your Mac or the bottom corner of Windows, and there's a little section that says enable JIT, and just choose the device that you're going to be using to enable JIT. And if it's not coming up on the Altstore, you're going to have to plug it back into the computer to give it that, to establish that connection. So I plugged it into my computer and I pressed enable JIT, so hopefully it's going to launch this time. Hopefully all this will change in iOS 17 when Apple finally allows side loading, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm hoping that this version of Dolphin is going to get a lot more attention and love. So once you're in the game, start button is going to be set to the left trigger, and that's because if you press start on the controller, it brings up this little menu here. So if we press the cog on that menu, this is where we can go through settings. Now the settings here is very limited. It's not like on Android where I can change huge graphical settings in the middle of the game. But if I go to the settings section, I can change the controller that's in the port and I configure the controller. So if the controls aren't working out for me, I can change the controls, which is something you can't do on the Android version. So I saw swings and roundabouts. It's one of my favorite things because if I'm playing a game like Skyward Sword and I want to change to tilt controls, I can automatically switch to tilt controls. Same with games like Super Mario Galaxy and things like that. I can change the controls on the fly. I really do appreciate this. Touchscreen does exactly what it says on the tin. You can manipulate the touchscreen controls, things like haptic feedback, but we're not using touchscreen. If you are using touchscreen, that's where you're going to find all the controls for the touchscreen. Also on the settings section is change touchscreen control. It's currently set to none because I have a controller plugged in, but if you didn't, it would have a selection of touchscreen controls for the GameCube controller or the Wiimote. There's only 2 at the minute, and hopefully they're going to improve that at some point in the future. I really do hope the guys that were working on this do pick this up again and improve upon it, because it is actually a fantastic version of Dolphin and it can be so much better. Okay, so let me just press start, show you that the control works. I'm currently playing at 1080p, Animal Crossing running on my iPad. So if I press the start button and I want to close the emulator, click the cross. Do you want to close it? And there you go. That's all the settings that you're going to need to set up. Like I said, some games do need different settings. So once you're having problems with a game, all you got to do is go to Safari, wiki.dolphin-emu.org, and search for the game. So let's say we're going to go with Super Mario Sunshine. Search for Super Mario Sunshine. It's come up, and if we go down to the section that says configuration, it'll tell you the things it'll tell you the settings that you want to look out for. So if you use anisotropic filtering, anything above 1+ time, it's going to give you improper graffiti behavior. If it's going to need scaled EFB copy off to avoid blocky graffiti edges, and synchronized GPU thread on to avoid crashing after long periods of play. So these are all problems that are going to come up while you're playing Super Mario Sunshine, and here are the fixes for them. You can also find some gecko codes for like 60 FPS, 16:9 aspect ratio, and links to HD texture packs and other things like that on the Dolphin Wiki. It is a wonderful place, and I go here often before I even play a game, so I know how to get the best settings, and I'm not wasting time playing a game. Another thing you can do if you want to play a game possibly, you can enable JIT by starting a game. You can close Dolphin and reopen it. So let's turn Wi-Fi off. We'll turn Wi-Fi off for now. And then I will go to launch a game, a different game than Animal Crossing. We'll launch Pikmin. Give me an NKit warning, so I'm using NKit. And it started without the internet connection. That's because JIT has been enabled. Now, if I was to close it this way, if I was to close Dolphin iOS this way, and then open it again and try to run Pikmin 2, it's going to ask me to enable JIT. So what you got to do if you want to play it portably is not close that app while you're out and about in the wild, because otherwise you're going to have to open your laptop, go to Alt Server. It's one of the many caveats that comes with using Dolphin iOS, and it's why I don't really recommend it if you've got a decent Android phone or if you've got a computer that can play these games already. But if you are just an iPad and iOS man and that's what you want to do, then you're going to have to deal with these caveats until iOS 17 and side loading happens. Even then, I think we're going to be a couple of months away from just being able to load Dolphin onto our phones or iPads. So let's take a look at using cheats on Dolphin iOS. So Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess notoriously needs a patch, a Hyrule Speed Fix patch, which is automatically on there, which is great. So if I click it on, it's as simple as that. Hold down on the game, click Properties, go to Patches, and there's the Hyrule Speed Hack. Gecko codes are obviously in the Gecko section. Now this bit is empty. I can try, if I wanted to add them, I just click the Add button, click the name, input the code, and click Save. Action replay codes, they're all here, which is fantastic. So now I can just find the codes that I want to use, such as infinite health, max health, things like that, turn them off and on, and start the game. But let's say we've got a game that doesn't have any patches or AR codes, and we want to add them ourselves. If you hold on the game, so we're going to use Super Mario Galaxy 2 as the example. We go to the Gecko section, there is no Gecko codes, no action replay codes, and there's no patches added to it. So if we go to the action replay codes and we click add, we can add them in there. And where we find them is if we go to Safari and if we type Super Mario Galaxy 2 cheat codes Dolphin, and we can go to any one of these websites and we go to one of these sites. Now a lot of the Gecko codes have been taken offline and there are dedicated Google sites, which I am very appreciative of. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to check that we have the exact game code that's with this cheats. So it's SB4E01. So if I go back to Dolphin, go to Info, and SB4E01 is the game ID of the game that I'm using. So that works. And then I'm just going to use a simple cheat. We're going to use the Invincible to Enemies cheat. So start by copying the name, and then we'll go back to Dolphin. And I'll go to the Gecko code section. I think this is a Gecko code. Click add and then paste that name in. Invincible to enemies. And then I'll go back to Safari. And no, it's trying to use it as a phone number. I'll copy that cheat. I'll go back to Dolphin. And in the code section, I'll paste in that cheat, and then I'll click save, and then turn it on. Okay, now when we start Super Mario Galaxy, we should be invincible to enemies. Let's just test it out and see if it works. Okay, so let's test out our invincibility. Yep. We're completely invincible to all our enemies. Now, I think this is running in 4K or 1080p. I can't remember which one we set it to. But as you can see, it's a Nintendo Wii game, and we are getting like 60 to 50 frames per second. I'm positive this must be 1080p. But the main point is that the cheat worked. I am now invincible to all enemies, which is one of the many functions of cheats. You can also use this for widescreen patches, and there's a bunch of hacks and patches and things like that. To leave the game, press start. On my Xbox controller, press X. And then close current emulation, and that is how you add cheats to games on Dolphin iOS.